The night my mother begged me not to open that door is a night I still replay in my mind, over and over, wondering what would have happened if I had listened to her just a few seconds longer. It was quiet in the house, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the walls themselves are holding their breath. I remember standing in the hallway, my hand inches away from the doorknob, while my mother's voice shook behind me, low and desperate, saying my name like she was trying to pull me back from the edge of something terrible. I had never heard her sound like that before. My mother was a strong woman, the kind who never panicked, never showed fear, not even when life hit us hard. She raised me mostly on her own, worked long hours, and still managed to keep our small home filled with warmth and order. That's why her fear stopped me cold. It didn't sound like anger or warning the way parents usually do. It sounded like pure terror, raw and unfiltered, as if opening that door would change everything she had worked so hard to protect. The door itself didn't look special. It was just an old wooden door, at the end of the hallway, one we rarely used. It led to a small storage room that used to belong to my late father. After he passed away, my mother kept it locked most of the time. She said it was full of junk, things we didn't need, memories better left untouched. I believed her, because I trusted my mother with my life. But that night, something made me curious in a way I couldn't explain, like an invisible hand was pushing me forward. Earlier that evening, the power had gone out for a few minutes during a storm. When the lights flickered back on, I noticed the door wasn't fully closed like it usually was. It was slightly open, just enough to reveal darkness inside. I felt a chill run through me, even though the house was warm. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself it was nothing, just my imagination reacting to the storm and the shadows dancing on the walls. But then I heard a sound. It was faint, almost soft enough to dismiss, like a whisper or a slow movement coming from behind the door. I froze. Our house was old, and it made noises all the time, especially when the weather changed. Still, this felt different. This felt deliberate, like something was waiting for me to notice it. That's when I called out to my mother. She was in the kitchen, and when she came into the hallway and saw where I was standing, her face drained of color. Her eyes locked onto the door, then snapped back to me. She rushed forward and grabbed my arm, her grip tighter than I'd ever felt before. "Don't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please don't open that door." I laughed nervously at first, trying to lighten the mood. I told her I just heard a noise and wanted to check it out. I said it was probably rats or old pipes. But she shook her head so hard it scared me. Tears welled up in her eyes, and that's when I knew this wasn't a joke or an overreaction. "There are things you don't need to know," she said. "Some doors are closed for a reason." Her words only made my heart race faster. I had so many questions, but none of them came out right. Why was she so afraid of a storage room? What was she hiding from me? And why now, after all these years, did it feel like the truth was right on the other side of that door? I pulled my arm away gently, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because something inside me needed answers. I needed to understand why my mother, the woman who taught me to face my fears, was begging me to run from this one. The storm outside rumbled again, thunder rolling low and deep, as if the night itself was warning us. She stepped in front of the door, spreading her arms like she was shielding me from danger. Her hands were shaking. "If you open it," she said, her voice breaking, "nothing will ever be the same again." Those words echoed in my head. Nothing will ever be the same. Part of me wanted to listen, to walk away, and forget I ever felt this pull toward the door. But another part of me, a part one didn't even know existed until that moment, felt drawn to the truth no matter how painful it might be. I thought about my father, about how little I knew about his past, about the questions my mother always avoided when his name came up. I thought about the secrets families keep, believing they are protecting the ones they love, when sometimes those secrets grow heavier with time. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and realized she wasn't just afraid for herself. She was afraid for me. My hand hovered near the doorknob again. The metal was cold, even through my skin. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, every beat louder than the last. My mother whispered my name one more time, a plea filled with love, regret, and fear. In that moment, I understood that whatever was behind that door was tied to our family, to our past, and maybe even to who I was becoming. I took a deep breath, torn between trusting the woman who raised me and trusting my own need to know the truth. The house creaked softly around us, the storm pressing closer, the door waiting silently like it had all along. And as my fingers finally curled around the knob, I realized this wasn't just about opening a door. It was about crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Just as I began to turn it, my mother let out a sob and said something that made my blood run cold, something I had never heard her say before. And that's when I understood that the real story, the one she had hidden for so long, was about to come out, whether either of us was ready for it or not. She said my father's name, slowly and clearly, like she was afraid the walls might hear her. Not your dad, not the name I grew up calling him, but his full name, the one I'd only seen on old documents. Her voice cracked when she said it, and she pulled her hand back from me, as if touching me suddenly hurt. I froze. In all the years since he died, she had never spoken his name out loud like that, not once. The hallway felt smaller, tighter, like the air had been squeezed out of it. I didn't open the door. Not yet. Instead, I turned to her and asked what she meant. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, thin and unsure. She didn't answer right away. She looked past me, past the door, like she was seeing something that wasn't there anymore. The storm outside grew louder, rain tapping against the windows in uneven rhythms. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked, and we both flinched. She told me to sit down. We moved to the living room, but even there, the door felt close, like it was listening. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. I waited for her to speak, but the silence stretched. I could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall, each second dragging by, heavy and slow. When she finally spoke, she didn't start with that night or the door. She started years ago, before I was born. She talked about how she met my father, how charming he was, how everyone trusted him. She said he had a way of making people feel safe, like nothing bad could touch them as long as he was around. I had heard parts of this before, the softer version, the love story she used to tell when I was younger. But this time, her words felt different, weighed down by something she wasn't saying. She told me they moved into the house shortly after they got married. Back then, the storage room wasn't locked. It was just another part of the house, nothing special. But over time, she noticed my father spending more and more time in there alone. He would tell her he was organizing things, fixing old items, handling paperwork. She said she wanted to believe him. She said love makes you ignore small warning signs because you don't want to imagine the worst. I asked her what changed. She swallowed hard and looked at the floor. She said there were nights she would wake up and find him missing from the bed. She would hear faint noises from down the hallway, low sounds she couldn't explain. Whenever she asked him about it, he would smile and brush it off, telling her she worried too much. She said she started to feel like a stranger in her own home. As she spoke, my thoughts kept drifting back to the door. I pictured my father standing behind it, doing something important enough to hide, something strong enough to leave fear behind long after he was gone. I tried to remember him clearly, but most of my memories were blurred by time. I remembered his laugh, his rough hands, the way he would lift me onto his shoulders. None of those memories matched the tension in my mother's voice now. She told me the door was locked for the first time the night she confronted him. She said she had followed him quietly down the hallway, her heart pounding, and found the door shut tight. When she tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. He came up behind her and asked what she was doing. She said his voice sounded calm, but his eyes didn't. That night, he told her some things were better left alone, words that sounded almost exactly like the ones she had said to me earlier. I felt a chill when she admitted that. It was like history was repeating itself, like I was standing in her place now, asking the same questions she once did. I asked her what was inside the room. She shook her head. She said she never truly knew. She said she was afraid to know. She told me after my father died, she locked the door and promised herself she would never open it again. She believed whatever was hidden there would fade with time, that secrets lose their power if they stay buried long enough. She believed she was protecting me by keeping it closed, by keeping the past sealed away where it couldn't hurt us. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was. I felt like something important had been kept from me my whole life. But when I looked at her, I saw how tired she was, how heavy this secret had been. Her fear wasn't controlling. It was desperate, born from years of carrying something alone. Still, that didn't stop the questions from piling up in my mind. If the door had stayed locked all these years, why was it open now? Why had I heard that sound? And why did it feel like whatever was behind it wanted to be found? The lights flickered again, just for a moment. My mother gasped softly and stood up, glancing toward the hallway. She told me the power outages were happening more often lately. She said the house had been acting strange. I asked her what she meant, and she hesitated before saying she sometimes heard noises too. She said she thought grief was playing tricks on her mind. Now, she wasn't so sure. I stood up slowly and walked toward the hallway again. My mother followed, pleading with me to stop. I told her I wasn't going to open the door, not yet. I just needed to look at it, to understand why it felt so different tonight. As we stood there, the door looked the same as it always had, old and scratched, unremarkable. But the space around it felt charged, like the air before lightning strikes. I noticed something then, something I hadn't before. There were faint marks on the wood near the handle, almost like scratches, worn down by time. I pointed them out. My mother's face tightened. She said she didn't remember those being there. I pressed my ear lightly against the door. She begged me to stop, her voice breaking again. I didn't hear voices or footsteps. I heard something softer, a low hum or vibration, steady and quiet. It sent a shiver through me. I pulled back, my heart racing. I told her something was wrong. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. She said she knew. She said she had always known, deep down, that the door wouldn't stay closed forever. She said secrets have a way of finding light, no matter how hard you try to keep them hidden. We stood there together, mother and child, bound by fear and unanswered questions. The storm outside began to fade, but the tension inside the house only grew stronger. I felt caught between the past and the present, between my mother's warnings and my own curiosity. The door remained closed, but it felt closer than ever, like it was waiting for the moment one of us would finally give in. And as the house settled into an uneasy silence, I realized this was only the beginning. Whatever my father left behind, whatever truth my mother had tried to bury, was slowly waking up. And whether we were ready or not, it was pulling us back toward that door, inch by inch. The next few days felt strange, almost unreal. The door stayed closed, but the presence it carried seemed to seep into every corner of the house. I tried to go about my routine, school, homework, small talk with my mother, but it was impossible to ignore the tension that had settled like a shadow. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows made me jump. And every time I passed that hallway, my eyes were drawn to the door, as if it was daring me to find out what had been hidden for so long. My mother tried to act normal, but I could see the strain in her eyes. She was quieter than usual, moving around the house with a stiffness that wasn't there before. She avoided the hallway, avoided mentioning the storage room, and even started double-checking the locks on the other doors. One evening, I watched her linger by the kitchen window, staring out at the empty street as if waiting for someone or something to appear. I wanted to ask her what was wrong, but I didn't. Not yet. Something told me she wouldn't answer, or worse, that she might say something I wasn't ready to hear. I started noticing little things that didn't make sense. Objects seemed to shift slightly from where I remembered leaving them. A small pile of papers on the counter would be moved to the floor. My father's old photographs, carefully arranged on the shelf, were slightly askew. At first, I blamed the wind, or maybe I was imagining it. But then I found my mother's old notebook, the one she kept hidden under the couch for years, lying open on the coffee table. She hadn't touched it in months. And the pages were filled with her handwriting about things I didn't understand, dates, names, strange notes about the house, about my father, about the storage room. That night, I tried to ask her about it. I held the notebook in my hands, my fingers trembling, and asked her why it was open. She took it from me gently, her face pale, and said, "Some things aren't for you yet." But her voice faltered, and I could see the worry she was trying to hide. It was then I realized this wasn't just about a locked room. There was a story she had been living with, a story that included my father, our home, and secrets that had been buried for years. And somehow I was at the center of it now. The tension started creeping into my dreams. I'd wake up sweating, hearing faint noises from the hallway, footsteps that stopped when I opened my eyes. I tried to convince myself it was the storm or the old house settling. But deep down, I knew it was more. Something, or someone, was waiting behind that door, and it wasn't just a memory. It was active, aware, like it had been waiting for the right moment. One afternoon, I met my friend outside, hoping a change of scenery would help. I told him about the strange noises, the door, my mother's fear. At first, he laughed it off, said it sounded like an old house playing tricks on me. But when I mentioned the notebook, his eyes widened. He said my father's family had a reputation, that there were rumors about strange occurrences, hidden rooms, and unexplained events tied to their name. I hadn't believed him at first, but the way he said it made my stomach twist. Suddenly, the stories my mother had told about my father's charm and mystery felt darker, like they were only half the truth. Back home, the house seemed to close in. I started hearing voices, or maybe it was just the wind, shaping itself into whispers. Sometimes it sounded like someone calling my name softly, sometimes like low murmurs that stopped as soon as I strained to listen. My mother noticed my unease and tried to reassure me. She said, "It's probably just your imagination. Houses do weird things. Don't let it scare you." But I knew her words were more for her than for me. She was trying to convince herself as much as me. The conflict between curiosity and fear became unbearable. I wanted answers. But every time I approached the door, my mother's warning echoed in my mind. I could see it in her eyes. Whatever was behind that door had power over us, had shaped our family long before I was born, and had the ability to hurt us if we weren't careful. It was more than just a locked room. It was a threshold to something my father had left behind, something my mother had tried to protect me from. One night, I stayed up longer than usual pretending to do homework but really listening. That's when I noticed it. The hum, faint at first, growing steadily, almost like a heartbeat coming from behind the door. My mother was asleep in her room, or so I thought. I tiptoed toward the hallway, my heart hammering. I pressed my ear lightly to the door and felt vibrations running through the wood. It was rhythmic, steady, like it was alive. I wanted to pull back, to run, but a part of me couldn't. I had to know if the door held just memories, or something far worse. The next morning, my mother called a friend of hers, a neighbor she trusted, someone who had known the family for decades. They came over and spoke quietly in the living room, their voices hushed, glancing toward the hallway more than once. I didn't hear all of it, but I caught fragments, mentions of my father, the house, and the word dangerous. My stomach dropped. Whatever had been behind that door, it wasn't just a memory or junk. It was something alive. Something that had left an imprint on the house, on my father, and now on me. Days passed, and tension built in layers. I found myself noticing small details I hadn't before. Shadows moved strangely in the corners of rooms. The hallway seemed darker than the rest of the house, even in daylight. I started checking locks on windows that didn't usually bother me. Even my dog, normally calm, stayed close to me, growling softly when we passed the storage room. It was like everyone or everything in the house knew the door's secret. I wanted to talk to my mother, to get her to tell me everything, but she was retreating. Some nights, she would sit on the couch and stare into the hallway, clutching the armrest as if it anchored her to reality. Sometimes she'd whisper things under her breath, names or dates I didn't understand. I realized she had lived with this tension far longer than I ever could, carrying a burden that had shaped her entire life. And now, she had to live it all over again through me. Meanwhile, the notebook began to make more sense. I started noticing patterns, names that repeated, cryptic notes that suggested something had been hidden in the storage room intentionally. I realized that opening that door wouldn't just reveal old family belongings. It would reveal pieces of a story no one had been brave enough to finish. My curiosity battled my fear constantly, each side gaining strength depending on the moment. And every time I thought I could ignore it, the door seemed to call me back, humming with that quiet, persistent rhythm that I could no longer deny. The house seemed to know I was paying attention. I heard footsteps when no one was there, doors that were shut banging lightly. Objects moved from one room to another. It was as if the house itself wanted me to open that door, wanted me to see what had been hidden for decades. My mother tried to protect me, tried to shield me from the truth, but the pull was too strong. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a need to understand who my father really was and what secret had haunted our family all these years. And so I stand at the edge of the hallway now, notebook in hand, my mother's warnings echoing in my head, the hum behind the door growing louder with every heartbeat. I know the conflict is no longer just mine. It belongs to both of us, the mother who has lived in fear for years, and the child who now has to face what she once tried to hide. The storm has passed, but the tension inside the house hasn't. Whatever is behind that door is waiting. And I can't turn away. Every time I look at it, the air thickens. Every time my mother glances down the hallway, her lips tighten in worry. And every time I think about opening it, I feel the weight of decades of secrets pressing down on me. The conflict isn't just between curiosity and fear anymore. It's between the past and the present, between the hidden and the revealed, between the truth my father left behind and the consequences of discovering it. And yet, I know one thing for certain. The longer the door stays closed, the stronger the pull becomes. Whatever waits behind it is patient. It knows I'll come back. And deep down, I'm afraid that when I do, nothing will ever be the same. The house waits. The door waits. And so do I. That night, the air in the house felt thicker than ever. The storm had returned, not as heavy rain, but as a low, persistent wind that rattled the windows and made the old wooden beams groan. I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing every small creak, every whisper of movement in the hallway. My heart kept skipping, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something important, was waiting for me, just beyond that door. I got up, quietly, and made my way down the hall. My mother was already awake, sitting on the edge of the couch, eyes fixed on the hallway. I could see her hands trembling in the dim light. She didn't speak at first, but when she finally did, her voice was barely audible. "I can't stop it anymore," she whispered. "It's coming. Whatever's behind that door, it's not waiting for you. It's waiting for me to let it in." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I had never seen my mother like this. So vulnerable, so raw. She had always been my protector, the one who faced life head-on. But tonight, fear clung to her like a second skin, and I realized this wasn't just about curiosity or danger anymore. It was about the very fabric of our family, about the truth my father had left behind, and the consequences of unearthing it. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away sharply.
"Don't," she said.
"If you touch that doorknob, if you open it, I don't know what will happen. I've tried to contain it all these years, but it's awake now. It remembers. And it knows you're here." I froze. The words didn't make sense logically, but the tone, the fear in her voice, made my blood run cold. I looked at the door, its simple wooden surface now feeling ominous, almost alive. I imagined the scratches on the handle, the faint hum, the vibration through the wood I had felt days ago. I knew she was telling the truth. Whatever was behind that door had waited too long, and it was patient and powerful. The wind outside picked up, and the lights flickered again. In that moment, I realized the house itself seemed to shift. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, and the hallway looked longer, darker. I could hear a low pulse, almost like a heartbeat, coming from the door. My stomach turned over, and yet I couldn't look away. Every instinct screamed to run, but another, louder voice whispered, "You need to know." I thought about my father. I thought about the stories my mother had hidden, the things she had refused to tell me. All my life, I had wondered about him, about his past, about the secrets he carried into this house. And now, the answers were right in front of me, waiting behind a door I had been warned not to open. I realized that the conflict wasn't just about fear. It was about understanding, about facing what had been kept from me, and about stepping into a truth that could change everything. I moved closer, my hand trembling as it hovered near the doorknob. My mother's voice broke through the silence, sharp and desperate. "Stop. You don't know what you're about to wake. You can't undo this, once it starts." I froze again. Her fear was contagious, more powerful than the curiosity gnawing at me. But then I remembered the notebook, the patterns, the names, the dates, and the notes that suggested there was more to my father's life than I had ever known. My curiosity, my need to understand, outweighed the fear. I had to see. I had to know. Suddenly, the lights went out completely. The house plunged into darkness, and the hum behind the door grew louder, more insistent. I could feel the vibration through the floorboards now, a steady, almost living pulse. I swallowed hard, heart hammering, and I reached for the doorknob again. My mother grabbed my shoulder. "Please," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Don't. I can't protect you if this starts. Just walk away." But before I could respond, the door creaked. Slowly, almost deliberately, it moved an inch on its own. I froze, my hand brushing the metal. The humming became a low growl, like something breathing behind the wood. Shadows danced on the walls, moving as if alive. My mother gasped and stepped back, pulling me with her, but I couldn't move. My curiosity, my need for the truth, had rooted me to the spot. Then I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, coming from behind the door. My name. It was soft, almost tender, but laced with something I couldn't understand. The voice wasn't like my father's or my mother's. It was something else, something that had waited, hidden, patient, and now awake. I felt a cold shiver run through me, and my mother collapsed to the floor, covering her face with her hands. I knelt beside her, trying to reassure her, but she pushed me back, shaking her head. "I warned you," she said. "I begged you not to open it. Don't make me watch this happen." I looked at the door again. It had moved slightly more, the hum now almost deafening in the silent house. The scratches on the handle seemed deeper, as if something had pressed against the wood from the other side. The hallway felt endless, dark and alive. I could sense that whatever was behind the door had been waiting for this exact moment. My curiosity, my courage, my ignorance, and it knew exactly how to exploit it. My mind raced. What was real? What was imagined? Could the house itself be responding to our emotions, our fears? Or was this something far older, far more dangerous, something tied to my father's secrets, something that had shaped my family long before I was born? The notebook, the strange events, the noises, the shadows, they were all connected. And it was all pointing to this moment, the edge before the truth revealed itself. The wind outside howled again, rattling the windows, as if urging me to make a choice. My mother's voice trembled behind me, a mixture of fear, love, and warning. The hum behind the door grew louder, stronger, insistent, like a pulse matching my own racing heartbeat. The tension in the house was unbearable, a thick pressure pressing down on my chest. I felt trapped between fear and curiosity, between the known and the unknown, between my mother's desperate warning and the truth that had called to me for days. And then, just as I reached forward, the door shuddered violently, as if something on the other side was forcing it, testing it, demanding to be seen. My mother screamed, grabbing me with all her strength, pulling me backward. "I said no," she shouted. "Stay away. You don't understand." I stumbled, heart pounding, breath ragged, staring at the door that had held so many secrets for decades. The hum had transformed into a low, urgent growl, vibrating through the walls, through the floor, through me. Shadows twisted in impossible ways, crawling along the walls, stretching toward us. The hallway seemed to contract, the air heavy and electric. I realized then that whatever was behind that door wasn't just a secret, it was alive. It had been waiting, growing, watching. And now it was awake. My mother's hands gripped mine tightly. If you touch it, if you open it, I don't know what will happen. Just walk away while you still can. But the pull was irresistible. I could feel it drawing me in, whispering, promising answers, but threatening consequences beyond imagination. My curiosity battled my fear in every nerve of my body. And in that tense, frozen moment, I knew that the climax of the story, the point where everything changes, was right there, just on the other side of that door. And I couldn't turn away. As my hand hovered over the doorknob, frozen between fear and curiosity, a sudden sound cut through the tense silence, a soft, deliberate click, coming not from the door, but from behind me. I spun around. My mother was staring at the living room, wide-eyed, her face pale as if she had seen a ghost. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift toward her, curling unnaturally, like black smoke twisting without wind. What was that? I whispered, my voice shaking. She didn't answer at first. She sank to the floor, holding her head in her hands, muttering words I couldn't catch. Then she looked up, eyes wild, voice trembling. "It's not just the door," she said. I thought it was only inside, but it's here now. It's in the house." My stomach lurched. The humming behind the door had grown louder, more insistent, almost like a heartbeat that wasn't my own. But now, with my mother's words, it felt like the whole house was alive, vibrating with the presence of something I had never imagined. My heart pounded, and for the first time, I saw fear, not just mine, but hers. A fear that wasn't about what might be behind a door, but what had followed us, hiding in the walls, in the air, in the very floor beneath our feet. I glanced toward the hallway again, and the door quivered. Not just an inch this time. It shook violently, the hum escalating into a low, almost growling sound. And then, as if the house itself was exhaling, a faint whisper reached me from the shadows near the stairs. It wasn't my father, it wasn't my mother, it was something else. My name again, but distorted, stretched in a way that made my skin crawl. It sounded both close and impossibly far away. My mother shouted, grabbing my arm. "I warned you. You've unleashed it. You don't understand." I shook my head, panic and confusion clouding my thoughts. "What do you mean? What is it?" She didn't answer clearly. Instead, she pulled me into the kitchen and pointed toward the storage room. "It's not just a secret from your father's past, it's bigger. There are things in that room that shouldn't exist. Things that follow bloodlines. Your curiosity, it's awakened something that's been waiting for us for years. For decades." I froze. My mind spun with questions. Bloodlines? Followed? Waiting? What could possibly be in a storage room that carried this kind of power, this kind of presence? And how could it have stayed dormant for so long, only to awaken now, as if it had been waiting for me specifically? The lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a split second before the dim glow of the hallway light returned. In that instant, I saw it, a shadow, moving faster than anything human could. It flickered across the walls, reaching toward the door, almost tethered to it, almost alive. My mother screamed and pulled me backward. "It's trying to get out." I stumbled, heart hammering, and looked back toward the door. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The scratches on the handle weren't random, they formed a pattern like symbols. Faint, almost imperceptible, but definitely deliberate. My father must have known. He must have left them there as a warning, a guide, or maybe a trap. And now I understood why my mother had been so terrified for so long. Whatever had been locked inside wasn't just a secret. It was something that could manipulate, something that could move, something that had waited for someone to awaken it. I backed up toward the kitchen table, my mind racing. My mother's face was pale, her eyes darting toward every shadow. She whispered again, barely audible. "It doesn't just want the room, it wants to come inside, to move beyond the walls." I tried to keep it trapped. I thought it was gone, but you've called it back. The house groaned around us. Floorboards shifted, windows rattled, and a low hum vibrated through the walls, through the floor, through my very bones. I could feel it pressing against me, alive, waiting. It wasn't just about opening the door anymore. The danger was here. It had followed us through the years, hiding in silence, feeding on secrets, and now it was awake and aware. Then I heard another sound, faint at first, like someone breathing just behind me. I turned sharply, but there was no one. And yet, I could feel a presence, just outside the circle of light, watching, waiting, moving closer. My mother's voice cut through the tension again, desperate. Listen to me. Whatever you think you know, whatever you think this is, it's bigger than you. Bigger than your father. And it will take whatever it wants if you let it. I glanced back at the door. The humming had become a low growl, almost a vibration I could feel in my chest. The symbols on the handles seemed to pulse faintly, like they were alive too. My hand itched to touch it, to uncover the truth. But every fiber of my being screamed to stay back. The house seemed to hold its breath, the shadows stretching toward the hallway, and I realized that whatever was behind that door wasn't just part of the past anymore. It was part of the present, part of us, and it was growing stronger by the second. I looked at my mother. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were fierce, desperate, warning me. "If it gets out," she whispered, "there's no turning back. You'll wish you had never been curious. Your father tried to stop it. I tried to stop it, and now it's too late to stop itself." And in that instant, I understood. The conflict wasn't just about unlocking a mystery or learning a hidden truth. It was about survival. The room, the door, the secret, they weren't contained anymore. Something had been waiting for someone brave or foolish, enough to try to uncover it, and it had chosen me. The shadows shifted again, moving faster, darker, pressing against the edges of the hallway. I could hear a faint scratching, something tapping, something deliberate. The hum, the growl, the whispering voice calling my name, it all converged in one terrifying moment, and I felt the full weight of what my mother had tried to protect me from. I realized then that the climax, the moment everything changes, was already here. The danger wasn't behind the door anymore. It was inside the house, inside the walls, inside us. And whether we survived it or not depended on what happened next, the choice I was about to make, the curiosity I couldn't suppress, and the consequences my father had hidden for decades. And the worst part? I didn't know if my mother's warnings would be enough. I didn't know if she had been brave enough to face it before, or if we were about to pay for curiosity with a cost we couldn't imagine. The door waited, the house waited, and whatever had been hiding in the shadows, it was ready. I could feel the vibration in the hallway as if the house itself was alive, waiting for my next move. My mother was gripping my arms so tightly it hurt, her knuckles white, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand," she whispered, voice breaking. "It's not just a room. It's him, it's everything he left behind." I took a shaky breath and looked at the door one last time. The hum had become a low, deafening roar, vibrating through the walls and floor, making my stomach twist. My father's past, my mother's warnings, the notebook, the strange noises, they all pointed to this single moment. I knew I had to act, and in that instant, fear and determination collided. I reached for the doorknob. My mother screamed and tried to pull me back, but I twisted it anyway. The door swung open slowly, creaking as though protesting decades of silence. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying a faint metallic smell and the soft whispering that made my blood run cold. Shadows poured from the room, swirling like smoke, almost solid, almost alive. My mother fell to her knees, sobbing, covering her face. And then I saw him. Or, at least a shape. My father's figure, or what I thought was him, stood inside the storage room, motionless, draped in shadows that seemed to shift across the walls. His face was familiar but distorted, his eyes darker than I remembered. He wasn't alive in the way I understood, but neither was he gone. He spoke without moving his lips, a whisper that echoed in my mind. "You were never supposed to open this." I froze, unable to move, as the shadows stretched toward me. The symbols on the door handle glowed faintly, pulsating in rhythm with the low hum. The notebook clutched in my hands seemed to vibrate, as if responding to whatever energy filled the room. My mother screamed my name, begging me to step back, but I couldn't. Everything I had been chasing, the truth about my father, the secrets of the house, the warnings in her notebook, was here, and I had to face it. The shape of my father, or what remained of him, started to move toward the edge of the doorframe. It wasn't threatening, not in the way I had imagined, but the presence was undeniable, overwhelming. The air felt electric, heavy, and every hair on my body stood on end. Then, the unexpected happened. My father's shadow spoke again, louder this time, directly into my mind. "It's not me you need to fear, it's what I locked away." I blinked, confused, terrified, but also strangely calm. My mother's voice trembled behind me. "He trapped it for a reason," she said. "He tried to protect all of us, and I've been protecting you." The shadows in the room twisted violently, as if reacting to her words, and I realized that the presence behind the door was feeding on fear, on curiosity, on the emotions we brought to it. Instinctively, I stepped back, holding up the notebook. The words, the patterns, the symbols, they suddenly made sense. This was the key. The notes weren't just warnings, they were instructions, a guide to neutralize the entity that had grown in the darkness. My father had left it for me, knowing I would eventually face it. I read aloud the phrases I had pieced together, my voice shaking. As I spoke, the shadows recoiled slightly, writhing in resistance. My mother joined in, her voice trembling but strong. Together, we recited the words, tracing the symbols with our fingers in the air, as if the very act of acknowledgement contained power. The low growl became a roar, then a shriek that rattled the windows and shook the walls. The shadows shrank, twisting inward, retreating toward the storage room as if pulled back by invisible chains. The air grew warmer, lighter, and for a moment, I dared to hope we had succeeded. And then the room went completely still. Silence. The door hung open, empty, the shadows gone. The hum vanished. My mother collapsed against me, sobbing in relief, and I sank to the floor, trembling, unable to believe we had faced what had haunted our family for decades and survived. I thought it was over. I thought we had won. But then I noticed something on the floor near the back of the room. A small, dark object, half hidden under a pile of old papers and boxes. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was a key, but unlike any key I had ever seen. Strange symbols were engraved all over it, ones that matched the markings from the notebook. And etched faintly into the metal were the words, "Not everything is bound by this door." My mother's eyes widened when she saw it. "No," she whispered. "It's not finished. It never ends, it just waits for the next step." I felt the weight of the key in my hand, heavier than metal should be. A new fear rose in my chest, but so did a strange clarity. Whatever had been behind the door had been contained, yes, but it wasn't gone. It was waiting, patient, intelligent, and bound to our family in ways we hadn't fully understood. My father had done what he could, my mother had protected me, but the story wasn't over. I looked at the door one last time. The hallway was quiet now, deceptively calm. The shadows were gone, the hum silenced, but the knowledge of what waited, the memory of the presence, and the key in my hand reminded me that danger, mystery, and secrets could be awakened again. And in that realization, I understood the final truth. Curiosity had consequences, and some doors, even when closed, never truly stay shut. The climax had passed, but the story, the legacy, and the suspense were far from over. The house was silent, but I knew that silence itself could be deceptive. And as I held the key, my mother beside me, trembling but alive, I understood that we had survived the storm, but another storm, darker and more patient, was still waiting, just out of sight, just beyond the next choice. And the most terrifying part? That key meant I had the power to open it again. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, my mother and I finally sat on the couch, the key resting heavily between us. The house had gone completely quiet. The hum, the whispers, the low growl, they were gone. For the first time in days, I could breathe without feeling the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. My mother's hands shook as she took mine, holding them tightly. I looked at her and realized how much fear she had carried all these years, not just for herself, but for me, for our family. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked softly. "About the storage room, about all of this." She sighed, her shoulders sagging as if a huge weight had been lifted just by speaking. "I wanted to protect you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Your father, he was complicated, full of secrets. He thought he could contain it all, keep it from hurting us. I believed him. I really did. But after he passed, I realized I couldn't protect you from everything. I tried. I locked it away. I thought it would be enough." I nodded slowly, understanding dawning. It wasn't just the door. It was a legacy, a burden carried by my parents and now handed to me. I realized my father had tried to hide the darkness, my mother had tried to shield me, and somehow, the key in my hand represented both the danger and the trust he left behind. We stayed there in silence for a while, letting the house settle around us. The storm had passed, and a faint moonlight filtered through the curtains, painting the room in a soft, calming glow. I glanced at the storage room, still closed, the key glinting faintly in my hand. I realized that the room wasn't evil on its own. It was the secrets, the unknown, the unspoken truths that had made it frightening. My mother finally spoke again. I think it's time to face the rest. The truth about your father, the family history, everything I've kept hidden. You need to understand it if we're going to move forward." I nodded. I had always wanted to know more about him, even if it meant facing fear. "Then show me," I said. "Tell me everything." She took a deep breath and began recounting the parts of my father's past that I had never known. She told me about the choices he had made, the secrets he had kept to protect us, and the strange events tied to our family line. She explained how the storage room had been used to contain things that were dangerous, things that had the potential to harm anyone who wasn't prepared to deal with them. She didn't go into unnecessary detail, but enough to make me understand the gravity of what we had faced. As she spoke, I realized how much love and courage had gone into keeping me safe. Every action, every warning, every fear she had shown over the years was rooted in a desire to protect me from something I wasn't ready for. And now, standing here with her, I understood that protection didn't end when the danger was gone. It lived in the lessons she passed on, the wisdom in her voice, and the strength she had taught me. Eventually, we decided to lock the storage room again. The key stayed in a safe place, but the door wasn't just a barrier anymore. It was a reminder. A reminder of the power of secrets, the importance of caution, and the courage it takes to face the unknown. I realized that curiosity is natural, even necessary, but it must be tempered with respect and understanding. In the days that followed, the house returned to its usual rhythm. The strange noises, the shifting shadows, and the whispers didn't come back. My mother and I spent time restoring our home, arranging things and reconnecting. But we both knew that the key represented something larger than us, something that could never be fully erased. It was a symbol of knowledge, responsibility, and the choices that define us. I also noticed changes in myself. I had faced fear in a way I never had before, and it left me stronger, more aware of my instincts, and more connected to my family's history. I learned to appreciate the layers of protection my parents had provided, the sacrifices my mother had made, and the complexities of my father's past. I understood that life isn't about avoiding danger entirely. It's about understanding it, respecting it, and knowing when to act. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, I asked my mother if she had any regrets. She smiled faintly, a tired but relieved smile. "Regrets," she said. "Maybe a few. But I did what I had to do to keep you safe. And now you understand why. That's all that matters." I realized she was right. The danger had passed, but the lessons remained. The story of the storage room, the key, and the shadows was not just a story of fear. It was a story of love, courage, and resilience. I had learned that some secrets must be handled with care, and that facing them requires both bravery and respect. Before I knew it, days turned into weeks. The house felt warmer, lighter, safer. My mother and I found a new rhythm, one that included sharing stories, learning about our family history, and appreciating the life we had survived. The key remained hidden, a reminder of the night that had tested us beyond anything I had imagined. And yet, in quiet moments, I would glance at the hallway, toward the storage room. The memory of the hum, the shadows, and my father's presence lingered. But it wasn't fear anymore, it was awareness. I knew what had happened, and I knew that understanding it, respecting it, had given me control rather than leaving me powerless. One night, as I placed the key back in its safe spot, my mother came up beside me. She rested a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "We survived. We faced it together. That's the important part." I nodded, realizing that this story, our story, was not just about fear. It was about family, trust, and the courage to confront the unknown together. We learned that secrets, no matter how dark or frightening, don't define us unless we allow them to. What defines us is how we face them, how we protect those we love, and how we carry the lessons forward. That night, my mother and I understood that the past may shape us, but it doesn't control us. We had survived the shadows, the mystery, and the danger, but most importantly, we had survived together. And so the house, once heavy with fear and suspense, finally felt like home again. The storage room remained closed, the key hidden, the shadows gone, but the lesson stayed. I knew now that curiosity must be paired with caution, that love can be stronger than fear, and that family, in the face of the unknown, is the greatest protection we can have. As I sat on the couch with my mother, the storm long gone, moonlight casting gentle patterns across the floor, I finally felt safe. I finally understood. Whatever secrets my father had left behind, whatever shadows had haunted our home, they were no longer beyond our control. The story that had begun with fear ended with clarity, strength, and connection. And even though the key and the storage room remained part of our family's history, I realized that the real power wasn't in opening the door. The real power was in facing the unknown with courage, respecting the past, and moving forward with the people you love. That night, for the first time in a long time, I smiled. And for the first time,